What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This one I'm going to be doing a mock auction draft on the Sleeper platform. After I did one on the Yahoo platform, there was a request from you guys to do one on the Sleeper platform as well, so I figured I'd do that. This will be my first auction draft done this offseason on Sleepers, so it'll be interesting to see how those values vary quite a bit. Just doing a quick glance through it, looks like they're more or less relatively similar. The primary differences I've really noticed so far are just how expensive the quarterbacks are. Normally in other platforms you see them going for much cheaper, but um, certainly interesting to see that. So we'll see how this plays out. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to start the draft here. It should fly by pretty quick too. I was able to tune things. Unfortunately, on the Sleeper platform, there's no way to do it with anything other than the computers. So just understand that we're going to be working with CPUs that are going to be bidding and stuff here, so it will be a little bit different, but still be interesting to see how these auction values really dictate our draft strategy here. So let's start the draft here. Alright, so my turn to nominate. I will generally advise that I would nominate players I'm uninterested in drafting. I just haven't really found myself drafting Christian McCaffrey much this season. I think he's obviously a great player. No problem with him really at all. He's still projected to be my wide receiver 2 in my ranking, or my running back 2 in my ranking, so I don't expect anything bad to happen for him this season. It's just more of a, I don't really like how my roster construction turns out when I spend upwards of 30%, even more, 35% of my budget on a running back. Right here, we're seeing him easily approaching 60. I bet he'll end up around that $70 mark. It's normally where you see him going. There we go, 67. So pretty chalk here. Nothing too shocking. Looks like we're going to see Christian McCaffrey go for 67. Like I said, I don't think that's by any means a bad draft pick. I just think that it's tough to build out a roster the way I want to under those circumstances. One thing I'll note as well is that this is a relatively small team that we're going to be drafting. It's only got 5 bench spots, quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex, along with a kicker and a defense. So things will be a little bit cheaper. Or not necessarily cheaper, but it's cheaper to build out a bench, and we don't need a huge starting lineup. So I would certainly recommend that in the smaller leagues like this, I highly recommend that you focus more and more on your starting lineup. In smaller leagues, you're going to have much less of a problem throughout the course of the season finding good players on waivers. It's just going to be an easier task for you if you need to acquire assets via the waiver wire, and um, it's just going to be you're going to be much happier after your draft if you look at your starting lineup and see just a true top tier performing team and know that most of the guys you're drafting on your bench in auction drafts or any draft really, they're not going to be guys that really end up on your team at the end of the season. It's a fun exercise to do. Go take a look at one of your drafts from last season. Look at the guys you drafted to be on your bench and just be realistic with yourself about how many of those guys actually hit. It was a good draft for you if even 1 or 2 of those hit. So just understand that putting that much stock into really caring about your bench. Obviously, in an auction draft, it's a little bit different because you can put a lot of assets towards your bench and really help guarantee that you do get the players that you're looking for, and you could spend quite a bit on your bench and then maybe have guys that are going to have higher hit rates, but nothing. It's not what I would recommend, especially in smaller formats like this. If you're in a league with um, super big rosters, then maybe it makes a little bit more sense to be deeper, just so that you can make sure that you're not having huge drop-offs at your positions once bye weeks come in. But certainly okay just to really punt on the bench, in my opinion, especially in auction drafts. I like Jefferson and Chase quite a bit. I just find that between the tier 1 wide receivers, so I've got a pretty strong view on these wide receivers. There's a pretty clear tier 1 for me in that it's Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, and Tyreek Hill. Out of that group, first off, I'm generally fading Cooper Kupp this season. I don't think that he's by any means a bad draft pick. There's a very real scenario where he finishes as the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. In fact, he could be the highest scoring player in fantasy this season, so he's certainly got that just unreal upside. But generally, my approach to high tier players when I'm drafting like this is just that I don't want them to bust. I don't want to be drafting a player that if they have a bad season or hit their low end in terms of the range of outcomes, it's just going to absolutely nuke my season. If you draft Cooper Kupp and either Stafford goes down or Kupp goes down, or maybe Kupp gets traded midseason because things just go absolutely horrendously for the Rams, which is certainly a possibility, then you're going to be having spent a top 5 draft pick on a player that's maybe going to be a wide receiver 2 if Stafford goes down. Um, it's just not something I want to do. The risk profile is too high for me spending up on Cooper Kupp. But back to what I was really getting at here is that there's that clear top 4 wide receivers that I'm really interested in. And to me, Tyreek Hill is the best value out of all those. I think he's got a realistic shot to finish as the wide receiver one, just like those other three. And he's the cheapest as well. But looking here as well, there's not a very huge tier drop for me once you go from those guys to guys like Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams. And Stephon Diggs looks like he's himself a significant value on Sleeper right now. $41 is way cheaper than what you see him on other platforms. On ESPN, he's closer to like 51, 52. On Yahoo, I believe he was around 50 as well. So if you want to take Stephon Diggs here, I think Sleeper does certainly look like it's the best platform to do it on. Um, we're still at that point in the draft. Really, nobody's going for under pre-draft value. I think that Tyreek Hill is a perfectly fine pick for $50. In fact, really considered it. I maybe should have, but having seen how much of a discount Stephon Diggs looks like he's going for, I think Stephon Diggs is the best approach here. $41 for Stephon Diggs for your wide receiver one is just it's really juicy. I think he's going to be a really solid fantasy player again this season. I know there's been some off the field stuff in terms of his just unhappiness with the Bills organization, but it's nothing that I'm worried about. He's still going to be a top 10 wide receiver, and honestly, he's also a guy that does have wide receiver one overall upside. Yeah, I'll go to 42. Um, I'd probably be willing to go up to around 45 here. I don't think that the tier drop between that tier one, especially that tier, I don't think there's a huge difference between those guys and guys like Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown. There is a tier drop there, but it's not super significant. And given how just drastically different the costs are, like Justin Jefferson costing 66 or Stephon Diggs costing 44, for $24, I'm going to be able to add a guy like probably Mark Andrews. He's generally around that price tag. Um, I must have missed him when I was scrolling through here. Yeah, Mark Andrews, $27. So it's just a good thing to do, especially in an auction draft where you really do get to build your team the way you want to build it. It's just good to do those little thought exercises. If you were in mid-season and someone offered you Stephon Diggs and Mark Andrews for Justin Jefferson, you'd probably take that trade offer. Maybe some of you wouldn't, but I personally would, especially if I was starting at the tight end position, which team making that trade would. So to me, it just makes sense to go with that sort of build rather than drafting Justin Jefferson. The price difference is just too high, and I don't think the production profile is going to be too different. Jefferson's going to be a beast, obviously. He's going to be the wide receiver one in all likelihood. I have no problem drafting him where he's being drafted, but in an auction draft where you don't have to pay up for like that top tier player, it's just not something I find myself doing super often. Bijan Robinson for $44 is a pretty good value as well. I have no problem with that. I generally, if I find myself targeting a high end running back, though, it's just Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's the guy there. I really think Nick Chubb's going to be it's going to be the best season in Nick Chubb's career. I fully believe that. I think he's got a legitimate shot at 2,000 total yards and 20 touchdowns. He's a guy that I've drafted a ton of this offseason, and really, I'm not slowing down there. I know that a lot of people are sort of coming around on him. I think on some platforms we're seeing him ranked as high as the running back three, just behind Eckler and McCaffrey. I have him ranked there as well. I think that it's just the upside's insane. I think that he's super safe as well with how just efficient he is, how much volume he's going to get, and I can't get enough of Nick Chubb this season. He's definitely a guy that I'm just looking to draft as much of as I can. So it's interesting to see how the one of the positions that you see in uh, auction draft that really varies the most from platform to platform in terms of how much they cost is the quarterbacks. I generally recommend, if you look on my website, roughly a maximum bid of 20% on your quarterback. We just saw, and that's for those top three. I generally prefer to get them for like 18% if I'm going to do that. We just saw Mahomes go for 20.5%. That's what $41 is in a $200 budget. It's just not something I'm really dying to do, especially because I've talked a lot this offseason about how I'm just super high on Justin Herbert. I really think he's going to be a guy that could easily crack into that tier one of the quarterback position, and he is so much cheaper. He generally goes for like $10, $15 depending on the platform you're on. 19 here. That's actually pretty high. That's actually about how much I'd be willing to pay. If you're on ESPN, Justin Herbert ends up actually costing like $9, which is just insane. Okay, so my turn to nominate here. Again, it's too early in the draft for me to consider nominating guys that I want. Oh, well, that was a mistake. Whatever. Nominating Jonathan Taylor was what I wanted to do there anyway. Um, yeah, it's just there is a time and a place in an auction draft for nominating players that you want, especially when you're getting towards a pivot point. So, for example, In most of the builds I do, I really decide that I want Mark Andrews. I think he's one of the best values in drafts. And to do that, like knowing whether or not you're going to do that will dictate what you're going to do for the rest of the draft. So when it gets around that time, I might be a guy that nominates Mark Andrews a little bit earlier than I normally would, just because I want to know if I'm going to be getting him at a reasonable price. Because if I'm not, I need to understand that, okay, I've pre-allocated, let's just say $30 for Mark Andrews. And it's nice to know ahead of time if I'm not going to be getting him for that, because then I could be the guy that knows, okay, I've got 30 extra dollars that I can go spend somewhere else. There's obviously a huge tier drop after Mark Andrews. I'm not really interested in any of the tight ends until we get to cheaper guys like Goddard. So that's a good example there where if I missed out on Mark Andrews, then, oh, Amon-Ra for 32 is a steal. Um, that's insane value on most platforms. Amon-Ra looks like he's going in between that 40 and $50 range. It looks like to me really so far Amon Ra might be the best value I've seen so far. Although we're looking at like Garrett Wilson's much cheaper on this platform than on others. It'll be interesting to see what happens with his ankle, but I'm not worried about that. Chris Olave for $22. I will be drafting Olave here. So it looks like we're going to be going for a bit of a wide receiver heavy build. Um, it's good to do just like an inventory check in terms of how much capital we're going to have left after we do that. So like looking at our roster here, our flex is going to get filled with Chris Olave. Um, That's going to give us three really stud wide receivers. Let's just budget $25 for him to be safe here. That'll put us at $101 to fill our quarterback, two running back spots, tight end, kicker defense, and five bench spots. I normally budget about $2 for each of my bench spots. That's going to be $10 right there. $1 for a kicker and a defense. That puts us at $89 for our tight end, our two running backs, and our quarterback, which means that we can spend about $22 per at that position. That's going to make things a little tight. What that means is that Nick Chubb's going to be a little pricey. We'd probably be punting a little bit on that bench, which is totally okay. Because generally for my RB2, I'm going for a cheaper guy. I'm going for a guy like David Montgomery, a guy like James Conner. And it just looks like the way Justin Herbert was statted out in terms of his projection, it's going to be tough for me to get. Like in an ideal world here, what I'd want to do is I'd want to fill the starting lineup with Justin Herbert, Nick Chubb, some combination of David Montgomery and James Conner. I'd want to add Mark Andrews here, and then I've got a top tier tight end, three really great wide receivers, top tier quarterback, two running backs I like, and then I've got a really cheap bench. But having done that math, I've now been able to look at it and say, okay, if I get Nick Chubb there, I'm not going to get the team I want because I'm going to have to miss out on getting a quarterback or one of the other running backs. So I think that I'll be a lot happier and have more flexibility. If I just wait a little bit, it's really important to me that I get Justin Herbert at the quarterback position. I find that I feel pretty bad about my team if I miss and go lower than that. I end up with a guy like Kirk Cousins and then doubling up with him on someone later, and it doesn't make me feel super confident about my team going into the season. So it's really important to me that I do get one of those like top six guys. So that's generally how I approach things. I'm still obviously going to be getting Chris Olave here. Mark Andrews is going to cost me quite a bit as well. It's just going to cost me another $50. I'll have 75 left for quarterback, running back. We're going to spend 12 on that. So we got $63 for each of those three positions. I mean, we can spend 21 on each. Let's go take a deeper look at these running backs here. So on Sleeper, let's take a look at how much the running backs I'd expect to cost are here. Certainly interesting seeing like James Conner on most platforms is closer to $10, not 23. I don't really see him as a value at $23. David Montgomery at 12 is still certainly a value. But that's super interesting. On the Sleeper platform, a lot of these lower end running backs that I'm in love with on other platforms, guys like Antonio Gibson for $1, David Montgomery for $5 to $6. Even Alvin Kamara is like $5 on ESPN. Madison's like half off on ESPN. A lot of these guys are far more expensive on this platform than on Sleeper. So that's very interesting. It's actually going to be relatively tough for us to get all the guys we're looking at here, which that's good. I think it's understanding that it looks like on the Sleeper platform in general, the running back position's been sort of jacked up, especially that dead zone RB. Normally you see that dead zone RB go for, I don't know, the 10 to 15% range, and then even lower than that once you get past that range. And it looks like on the Sleeper platform, it's actually significantly more expensive. There's not really a drop off until you get past Even Dylan is $17. There's some pretty clear bad values here, and um, I think that obviously as we get further into draft season, these will get adjusted. Like AJ Dillon is most certainly not a $17 asset. That's the most egregious one of all of those, but it's just something to keep in mind. I will likely, um, it looks like to me the best approach here is going to be getting Ramondre Stevenson, who I love, and then getting David Montgomery. Those seem to be like the two most reasonable values here. I'll still feel like I've got a really solid running back core, and I'm still going to be able to get Herbert and get my Olave, who I have to have Olave in pretty much every single draft. So we'll see how that pans out. Super interesting though. It looks like in general the drop offs are less steep on Sleeper than on other platforms. So what I mean by that is that on other platforms the difference in price between a tier one quarterback and then a guy like Justin Herbert is really significant. You get Justin Herbert for $10 instead of Jalen Hurts for like 35. As to where on this platform, it looks like you'd be expecting to spend about $30 on Jalen Hurts and then about 20 on Justin Herbert. So that actually sort of lends itself to thinking that maybe it makes sense to draft a guy like Jalen Hurts on Sleeper. $29 to me is actually a really good value for him. So I think that's certainly something worth considering. And that's actually going to be a good way to look at this. Now we've got Mark Andrews coming up. He's a guy that I'm super interested in. So I want to be involved on this. And if I don't get Mark Andrews, if things get out of hand, which I think I'd cap it at about $27, $28 here. If things get out of hand here from a price standpoint, then I'm going to know. Okay, so I'm going to cap it at 28. If someone bids me up for 29, then I know I'm not getting Mark Andrews, and then I would pivot and go get a better quarterback. But so that's what I was talking about earlier, but it's advantageous to get guys earlier. Um, and then same thing here. Chris Olave is a guy that I want to have. Chris Olave. How do I nominate people in this? Whatever. Okay, whatever. I still haven't figured out how to really nominate people on Sleeper, but regardless here, um, we've got a really solid top two wide receivers. These are two guys that I'd expect to finish in the top 10. Mark Andrews is going to be the tight end too in all likelihood. We still have only spent about half of our budget, which is a good spot to be in right now. We're actually one of the poorer teams in the draft. We only have less money or more money than one, two, three teams. So we're four teams. So we're actually pretty close to the middle here. All right, here we go. Chris Olave's up. This is a guy that we almost just have to have. 23 is fine. I'd go to 25. I just really think Chris Olave is going to be an absolutely monster season. This season, he's an elite deep threat. He got a huge upgrade at the quarterback position. That's just a really, really solid pick here. And just look at that wide receiver core with Mark Andrews. We're definitely going for a bit of a zero RB build here, but if you've got that wide receiver core and you've got that tight end, you're going to have a huge positional advantage. Note that this is a PPR draft, so I'm more willing to take that approach where I'm just going to get guys that are just studs and at the wide receiver position and almost punt on the running back position. But here's another guy I'm in love with this season. I think Ramondre Stevenson's going to be absolutely awesome this year. My only real concern would be that they're going to bring somebody in. The Patriots have met with Ezekiel Elliott today. Today is, I think it's the 30th, 29th. Um, so the world exists where things get a little bit hairier for Ramondre, and maybe he could lose out on goal line work. I would hope that I still expect them to sign somebody. Ty Montgomery's been banged up in practice. He's a guy that they were really factoring into their plans. But Ramondre Stevenson's going to be the lead horse there. It's just probably not going to be like the 70-80% snapshot that we were hoping would happen after Damian Harris left. But keep in mind, Damian Harris was there last year. Ramondre Stevenson was still a top 10 running back, and I think that's certainly within the range of outcomes for Stevenson again this year. But now we're getting to that point where we're pretty poor. We have $39 left to fill out our quarterback, our running back, our kicker, defense, and five bench spots. Five bench spots. So those five bench spots we're going to budget $10 for. Kicker and defense, that's one each. Now we've got $27 for our quarterback and our RB2. Taking a look at the quarterbacks here, I would certainly prefer of all these guys remaining to probably get. It looks like Herbert's going to be the best value for me here. It's really strange seeing a lot of these pre-draft values in general on other platforms. You'll see guys like once you get past Herbert and Lawrence, everyone's effectively free. It's like $3, $5. So interesting to see how expensive even these lower tier quarterbacks are. I would make note of that if you're doing an auction draft on Sleeper that I think you should actually get a higher tier quarterback because you're not really saving much money by waiting anyway, unless you wait so long that you're just screwed and you're playing Anthony Richardson and Geno Smith, and it's just going to be a tough season if you do that. So I do recommend getting one of those top tier quarterbacks. So take a look at the running back position. So obviously I really want to get David Montgomery here. He's going to cost me about $12. That'll put us down to 37 or 27. What's probably going to happen here is we're just going to have to accept that we're going to have some $1 guys on our bench, and that's totally okay. Um, like I said, especially in a league that's this small, I think it's okay to end up with a team that's really top heavy because you're going to be able to work waivers in a league like this. So I'm okay doing that. It makes the draft a little bit frustrating because you are at the whim of when you can nominate players and then hoping that you don't get outbid. So it could be a little bit frustrating, but I'm not going to sacrifice my starting lineup just to get a slightly better bench, especially given that these guys are still pretty expensive down here. Like, I'm not going to spend $4 on Samaje Perine. I'm not going to spend $9 on Rashad Penny. It's just not worth it for me. And it's just like if I'm gonna do stuff like that, I'd much rather just get a guy I like, fill out my RB2. Obviously, we got a relatively weak running back core if we're going into the season with Ramondre Stevenson and David Montgomery as our 1 and 2, but we more than make up for it with the starting lineup we've got at the receiver and tight end position. We're gonna get Justin Herbert as well because it's just gonna make our team much better. It's really interesting to see how long it's taking Jalen Hurts to be nominated. It's weird that the computer's not just automatically doing it. Um, I don't really have a take on that. It's just interesting to see Lamar get nominated before him and then actually go for effectively the same price. I think that's just wrong. Looks to me like Lamar Jackson, comparatively speaking, is one of the worst values on Sleeper right now, just because you can get Jalen Hurts for $2 more. So why wouldn't you? He's a much better fantasy asset, and he's been healthier the last 2 seasons as well. So definitely would avoid drafting Lamar Jackson on this platform. But we're really sort of hitting that lull here where we've spent a lot of our money. We got 5 players in the first 27 picks in this draft, which is insane. But if you think about it, it's like having 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. That's pretty insane value. Um, at this point, I'd like other people to be spending money on like wide receivers. I have a bunch of wide receivers. I'm clearly not interested in it, so I'm going to let the computer spend a bunch of its money, try and dwindle them down just before we get to that Justin Herbert offer. I'd like to get him for a couple dollars off so that I can maybe have a little bit of money to play with for my bench. But that's the problem with drafting with the computers here is everything goes pretty chalk. It's just tough to really get too much value or see any really significant overpays. Although, just as I say that, we just saw Deebo Samuel go for 14. He was supposed to be like 25 or something. So that's actually not bad value. I'm generally out on Deebo Samuel this season, but he's $14. That's totally acceptable. I'd definitely pay that. Keenan Allen for 18 is certainly interesting as well. I've got no problem with that. I think he's going to be a really good player. Um, really good fantasy asset. Just got to hope he stays healthy, but perfectly acceptable. It's a little bit cheaper than what you see him on going for on ESPN. Um, so I think in general the consensus here is that on the sleeper platform, the wide receivers are actually even cheaper than they are on ESPN. And ESPN I found to be relatively slanted towards wide receivers being cheap. So on a sleeper platform, it seems more and more like just going wide receiver heavy and then getting one of those top tier quarterbacks is the best move. And just figure the rest out. You're going to have stud tight ends, stud quarterbacks, stud wide receivers, and then who cares if your running backs suck? You'll figure it out throughout the course of the season. And that really seems like the strategy that this platform lends itself to. So really interesting to see that, but I think that is what makes the most sense here on Sleeper. We got Jahmyr Gibbs being nominated. I actually really like Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not projecting him to be a running back 1 this season like a lot of people are, but I'm projecting him to be with a running back 14. I think he's going to have a really solid season. I do think that between he and Montgomery is just clearly the better value. My apologies, I can't tell if you can hear that, but dog just barked, so sorry about that. But yeah, I just don't know who's going to be the better overall finisher, and given that David Montgomery is so much cheaper, I just find that he's a way better value than Jahmyr Gibbs. But that's not really an indictment on Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's a perfectly fine draft pick where he's going. Aaron Jones is another guy, just like 4 straight years has been a top 10 running back. He's continuing to get slept on. I don't find myself drafting a ton of him because I think he's just in that weird tier of the running back position where I don't see myself drafting many of them. But I think he's going to be a totally fine pick. I've got him ranked, I believe, as my running back 14. So a little bit low consensus, I think, but or a little bit above consensus, but below an RB1. But still think he's going to be great this season. Joe Mixon's another guy. We've seen his ADP rise lately as he's agreed to a restructured deal with the Bengals. He's clearly going to be the guy there. He's definitely the only talent they really have left at the running back position there. I like Chase Brown quite a bit, but I just don't think he's going to get any real work unless Joe Mixon goes down. This is the team that's all in on this season. If something were to be more serious with that Joe Burrow injury, then I think everybody on the whole Bengals offense would get knocked down. But I'm not worried about Joe Burrow yet. I think he'll be ready for week one and haven't really heard anything to be suggesting otherwise. So I think that Joe Mixon is still a perfectly fine pick where he's going as well. Amari Cooper's a guy I've actually been getting warmer and warmer on so far this offseason. He was a guy that I kind of overlooked after having done my projections and then looking back on them. It looks like I actually have him ranked the top 15 wide receiver. I've never been a huge Amari Cooper stan, but I think this could actually be a really good year for him this year. Deshaun Watson should be much, much better than what he was last season. I'm fully expecting him to rebound to being like at fringe top 10 quarterback level. I'm not expecting him to be an all pro or anything like he was prior to all of the off the field stuff and the holdout in Houston, but I think that there is a real world that exists where where Deshaun Watson makes Amari Cooper have his best fantasy finish of his entire career. I think Amari Cooper has a legitimate shot to be a wide receiver one this season. George Kittle for $24 is just a ridiculous overpay if you ask me. Me getting Mark Andrews for 28 or George Kittle for 24, it just seems like a no-brainer. Um, what I'm really noticing here on Sleeper is that there's just not a significant drop off in cost for players. It seems like it's not flat, obviously, because these guys are getting cheaper as we move down the ranks, but the best values are the guys up top. And I didn't notice that coming into the draft, but it clearly did dictate my strategy. I ended up with 5 players in the top like 2.5 picks. Yes, I'm still here, Sleeper. I'm just watching the draft because I have no money. Um, but certainly interesting to see what's happening there. Oh, it was my turn to offer. My bad. Whatever. Didn't want J.K. Dobbins anyway. So we're gonna let the computer spend some money on. But when the computer nominates Justin Herbert, we're gonna have to be super active here. Looking at the quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence would be like the next best value for me. I don't have a problem with it, but I just think Justin Herbert's a much better value. I think Justin Herbert's the guy that actually has like quarterback one overall upside, and I just don't think Lawrence truly has that ceiling. So here we go. Here, I really would like to get him at a bit of a discount so that we can actually build out a bit of a bench. We'll see what happens there. Oof, all right, we're gonna have to overpay. It's not a huge deal. I think he's worth it, but we're gonna have a really bad bench, and that's okay. So we've now got a max bid of 12, and if you recall, I really wanted to get David Montgomery, and he's supposed to cost about $12 on Sleeper. So if I get Montgomery for the price I'm hoping to get him for, which is $12, I will have $1 per bench spot, which is really something that I don't recommend. I think that in general, it's best to budget about $2 per bench spot because like what you're going to see here is let's just go take a look here. So looking through all the rankings, once you get to around, all right, we're gonna say pick 95. There's a few outliers, but around pick 95, pick 100, pretty much every player starts going for $1. Which sounds great, but the real difference is that if you have $2, you can actually buy all of those guys, and if you only have $1, you're effectively right into a snake draft where you only get to buy players that you nominate, and that means that you're really limited in terms of which guys you can get. You're basically in a snake draft where your draft pick can be vetoed, as to where if you allow yourself to budget that $2 for each guy, you can basically end up with a whole bench of like 8th, ninth, 10th round guys instead of having to go into that 15th round kind of tier. So you end up with a much deeper team, a team that you're going to be much more comfortable with going into the start of the season. I still don't really. I'm willing to wiggle on that some if it's really going to make a big difference for your starting lineup. Um, so, for example, here, we clearly need a running back too. If we go cheaper than David Montgomery, then we're kind of looking at like it's bad. We'd be looking at I don't know Samaje Perine, Brian Robinson, um, in terms of guys that are actually going to get touches. So I think that we really do need to try and get David Montgomery for $12. It feels bad, but the fact of the matter is he's going to be really, really solid, and I feel like the starting lineup we'd have if we pass on him is just going to be much worse. I don't think it's really going to help our bench much because we really get into a dead zone for the running back position after Montgomery here. There's a couple guys I like. I like Antonio Gibson, but for $10 I don't like it. I think Rashad Penny's got upside, but he's not worth $9. Brian Robinson for $3 kind of seems like the best value there, and he's somebody that I've drafted none of, but he's like kind of a decent zero RB approach guy, I guess, because he'll get touches and could fall in the end zone a few times, but he's never going to be a week winning performer. Um, so yeah, the running back position prices are just really, really gross on this platform. So I think that it just makes sense. Just got to spend up, get David Montgomery. I will have the starting lineup that I want to have, and I'm just gonna have to figure things out with this team as I go forward. Figure things out on waivers. Like I said, this is a much smaller roster than what you'd normally see. It's only a 14 team roster or 14 player roster, so there will be plenty of players available on waivers throughout the course of the season. Make note of that for your team. If you're anything 15 players or under, even in a 12 team league, there are going to be players available to you on waivers throughout the course of the season. It means that really just the smaller your team is, the more aggressive you can be about making your starting lineup as good as possible, especially even smaller league size as well. If you're in a 10 team or smaller league, just be aggressive, make your starting lineup as good as possible, and figure the rest out later because waivers will be your friend. So we'll just nominate Madison here. We're not going to get him. Really, kind of what I'm trying to do here is hope that all these running backs go ahead of David Montgomery so that all of the teams that are, theoretically looking to draft running backs will have spent their money on them already, and then hopefully I don't find myself in too much of a bidding war. Unfortunately, Team 4's got a ton of money left. They're going to need to get some running backs. I expect to have some competition there. Team 7's got money left enough to hurt me. Team 8 still needs a running back. But nothing too crazy. It'd be great to see Team 4 and Team 7 get involved in some of these guys so that I can feel like I'm a little bit clearer. It's obviously tough drafting with computers. You don't really know, these guys could be. The computer's not really focusing on roster construction the way we are here, but like it's nice to see Team 4 just spend up on Dalvin Cook there because it feels like there's less competition in terms of me getting the guys that I want once they come up. Okay, so now that we're sort of getting to the point where after Montgomery, we're only going to be getting guys that are $1 or less. Let's start to go through here and queue guys that are $1 that I'd be interested in grabbing. Actually, I've heard some really good things about Zay Flowers lately. It sounds like he's going to be a really integral part of that Ravens offense. I think he's the wide receiver that I recommend drafting out of Baltimore. Obviously, don't want to react too much to what we're hearing out of camp, but I think he's perfectly acceptable where he's being drafted, and he's honestly got upside beyond that. Um, yeah, there's a lot of guys actually that are $1 that are totally okay. It's obviously nothing super sexy because you are drafting guys for $1, but like there are plenty of players that you can draft that are going to be impact players this season. Um, so it's good to keep that in mind that if you find yourself in a spot where you had to wait forever and you ended up with guys that are much cheaper on your bench that you really wanted, I think it actually ends up being totally okay. Um, Guys like Khalil Herbert for $1 is totally fine, especially if he's my running back 3. I really want to get David Montgomery, but I'll feel a lot better if I can have him as my 3. I think he's got legitimate, top 20 upside this season. He's a really good player. It's just comes down to whether or not he's going to get the workload that we're hoping he gets in Chicago. It could be a really gross timeshare with none of them really catching passes, so that's why he's a dollar. But he's going to be efficient. He's a 5+ yard per carry kind of guy. He's going to be in an offense where Justin Fields is going to create plenty of openings for him because defenses are going to have to respect Fields' ability to run. If they do give Khalil Herbert the full workhorse role, then he's actually going to be really solid this season. Drake McKinnon's another guy I really like if I really wait on the running back position. He's just a guy that, you can play him. And sometimes that's all you're looking for at the running back position. Trust me, it always looks great after the draft, but once you get into week 10 and you've got 3 players that are hurt and a couple buys, you're really thankful if you just have a running back that you can play and he's going to get you some points. And McKinnon's that guy. He's really involved as a pass catcher for this team. He scores touchdowns for this team as well. And I think McKinnon for $1 is definitely worth drafting. Another thing I recommend when you get in towards these lower end guys is just shoot for some upside. Guys like Elijah Mitchell, guys like Tyler Algier. These are guys that they are one injury away from being monsters for fantasy, and they're $1. So, you can draft them, and they're guys that you can drop if you need to, if you need a roster spot. But you can draft them at your draft, and if something happens to the guy ahead of them, both these guys as well, especially Mitchell and Algier, they're guys I find myself drafting quite a bit of because they're actually going to be getting some touches for their teams, even if the starter ahead of them and Bijan or McCaffrey's healthy. I think you would see Elijah Mitchell get more work than Algier if everybody's healthy. But the point being here is that these are guys that you can play if you're in like a deeper league and you're in a pinch, you need a running back too, and you just got to do it. And you can hope for them to fall in the end zone, but there's legitimate league-winning upside for both of those guys if something happens to the guy ahead of them. So that's my turn to nominate a player. I'm going to nominate Quentin Johnston. He's a guy that I find myself really trying to get, especially now that I have Herbert. I really like pairing him with Herbert. He's super cheap. He's a guy that I think has a ton of upside. He's a really talented deep threat. He's a guy that's going to be super involved downfield. This is a team that's really talked about wanting to stretch the field a lot. Quentin Johnston, they spent a high draft pick on him. There's also just a very real scenario where something happens to Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, which, shocking, it will probably happen again this season because they both always miss games. And if that happens, then Quentin Johnston's the kind of guy that legitimately would slot into being a top 20 wide receiver right away because of the target share he'd get and what's going to be a really high-octane, really fast-paced offense. So that, to me, makes Quentin Johnston a really quality draft pick. Especially at $1 in your home leagues and stuff, if you're doing auction drafts, you're not going to get him for $1 because there will be teams, for example, like computers have actually done a pretty good job of not saving too much money. But in your home leagues with real people, you'll see people that they weren't aggressive enough during your drafts. So when you get to that tier of players, in the 8th round range that I said start going for $1, a lot of them end up going for, I don't know, $10, $15 because teams realize they just have too much money left and they might as well just buy the best player available. So keep that in mind. You're going to have to know when to let a couple of players go. There will be teams in your league that they have money to blow. They're going to blow it. It's going to be frustrating because they screwed up and now it's hurting you. But just keep that in mind. And I don't expect Quentin Johnson to be $1 in any drafts that are actually happening, but I think he could easily be under $5, and I think he's still worth that. He's going to be a really good player, and I like drafting him where he's being drafted. Darren Waller's a guy I just don't find myself drafting any of, especially something about the tight end values on Sleeper is just crazy. All of these guys have gone for like 20. It's been okay. Look at this. We've got every single one of the first 6 tight ends cost more than $20 on ESPN. You can get guys like Goddard for $6, Kyle Pitts for $6, Kittle for like $10. And that's a lot closer to what I'd be willing to pay. Goddard I actually like quite a bit. I'd pay up above like 7-8%. So $15 for Waller or for Goddard I think is perfectly fine. But like that's just really interesting. It really says to me that Mark Andrews is a you know comparatively much better value than all of these guys in this draft. And we see the same thing in Sleeper for the quarterback position. Take a look here. You can get Jalen Hurts for 29, or you can get Justin Fields for 25. Like, just take Jalen Hurts for 29 if you're going to do that. Or if you want Justin Herbert for 20 or Trevor Lawrence for 14. Just take Justin Herbert for 20. So yeah, just take note of that on the Sleeper. It seems like there's some really weird drop-off points where players don't really get a whole lot cheaper, even if they get significantly worse and less productive. So just know where those are and understand that I think that you want to get one of the top three quarterbacks. You want to get probably Mark Andrews. You want to get a couple of these top tier wide receivers. And I think on this platform, it just makes sense to sort of punt the running back position, which is really interesting. I don't really find myself full on punting the running back position too often. I generally want to at least hero RB it and also get, a solid guy like a Nick Chubb. But, if you can build a wide receiver room like I have here, I think it's tough to really knock what I did because I've got three guys that I think are going to be top 10 wide receivers. I've got what in my mind is a top 4 quarterback. I've got in my mind a top 2 tight end. And I've got in my mind a top 10 running back despite not paying too much for him. So I actually really like this roster. And that's where doing the more research that you can do is really going to pay off as well. If you find yourself in a spot where, okay, you spent too much money, you've really got to dig deep and look at those $1 guys, that's going to be an area where your league mates are not going to have the same advantage that you do. They're not going to know to look down here and look for these guys. Like me getting Khalil Herbert for $1 here is going to be really huge for my team. He's a guy that I think has a legitimate shot to be a guy that I can play on any given week. He's going to get work. He'll probably get 10, 15 touches. He won't catch many passes, but that's totally fine getting him there. Obviously, I don't want him to be my running back 2. I'm looking for him to be my running back 3 or 4. So, got to get ready here. We got David Montgomery coming up real soon. I will spend all $12 I have to on him. If I can't get him, then things get interesting. So we'll see what happens there, but um, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I really do think that he's worth all $12. I think he's going to be a guy that could easily be a top 15 running back this season, and honestly, top 10 is certainly possible for him. So let's just go up to 10. I'm bidding 10 because I want to make sure that if someone bids, oh wow. Yeah, I figured it wouldn't let me. It was weird that it was letting me. That didn't really work. I tried to bid 10, thinking the CPU would outbid me by 1, but it looked like the CPU was actually pretty smart and looked and saw that my max bid was 12, so they bid 12. And that's something that I would actually point out. That makes a lot of sense to something that you guys should do during your drafts. If you find yourself in a bidding war on players, look and see what the player, your opponent's max bid is. If it's a scenario like that, you probably just save yourself $1. Maybe the CPU was happy to take David Montgomery for 13, but because they saw that, well, my max bid's 12, they should bid 12 and save themselves that dollar because that could be a huge difference down the line. So that's where it really helps just to pay attention, see how much money each of your league mates has left during your draft, and to use that to your advantage. So that's a bummer though. That's the first thing that's really gone horribly here. Looking at the running back position now, we really do need to get a running back 2 that I'm confident in. James Cook and AJ Dillon I can't afford. Brian Robinson for $3 is a perfectly fine draft pick. He's a guy that I can play any given week, and then I can just shoot for upside. I think Devon Achane's got a ton of upside. Samaje Piran's a guy I like. We're really starting to feel like we need to shoot for the stars a little bit here because that's the beauty. If I get Brian Robinson, I can play him week 1. He'll be totally fine. He won't be great. He'll be a guy that I can play and just hope he falls in the end zone. If he doesn't, it'll be a disappointment. If he does, it'll be a good week. But I think that's okay just because of... Did James Cook really go for $5 and I missed that? Well, that's a bummer because I would have spent 5. So should have been paying more attention instead of talking. But James Cook would have been worth 5, especially with the spot I put myself in here. But so let's see what happens with Antonio Gibson. Maybe he'll go for cheap too, and I'll feel better about things. Or not. They'll go right up to 11. I can't do that. Well, I could have. And maybe I should have. Um, yeah, there's a time and a place where sometimes you just need to bite the bullet and feel like do what you feel like is a significant overpay for a player that you want because it it really can be the best thing for your team. So like even if I felt like Antonio Gibson for $11 was a significant overpay, I still would have felt like he improves my team. He's a guy that I would start, and I save money. Nice, I've got the extra money, but now like what am I gonna be able to spend it on? Like I guess I'll get more depth. I'll get P Ryan, and I will get Brian Robinson. So I guess there's a case to be made there. I don't hate it, but I think I actually should have just done it. I'm going to spend the $4 on Brian Robinson. It's an overpay. I don't really think he's worth that, but my team needs running backs. I don't want to be putting myself in such a big hole where I just desperately need to find something on waivers, and I want a guy that I can start. So that's going to happen there. I really haven't drafted any of Brian Robinson this season, but it ended up being the right move here. So we need two more bench spots. I'd like to go with one more running back and then probably one more wide receiver. I think Gabe Davis is a really great um, guy to have on your bench, and then Samaje Perine got another guy that I think you can play week in and week out, especially earlier on in the season while Javonte is still getting healthy. So adding Perine, he's a guy that I can play as my running back too and feel okay with. And then getting a guy like Gabe Davis, he's just going to be a really nice flex option, a guy that if I need upside on a weekly basis, I can play. Hopefully with this team, I'm not playing him because I've got 5 wide receivers that I really like. So actually, the more that I think about it, maybe I should look for a second running back. I've got a max bid of 9. Let's take another look at the running back position here. No, nobody that I find worth it. So I'll spend the $2 on Gabe Davis, and then I'll spend whatever I got to spend to get Samaje Perine, and that'll do it. That's the beauty here is too, looking at this, like, there are going to be a lot of good players on waivers. I'll be okay. I'll figure something out at the running back position. It's going to work out, and my receivers and stuff are just so good that it's just really not going to matter. We didn't do a perfect job of budgeting here. We're going to end up with a bit max with like, I don't know, $3 left over, which isn't fantastic, but it's $3. It's not the end of the world. I'm totally okay doing that, and it's not going to hurt my team too much. My general rule of thumb is as long as I finish the draft with less than $10, I didn't completely butcher it. So totally okay there. Guess it's whatever. My turn. Nominate a kicker. But yeah, you guys don't need to watch me draft a kicker in defense. No point in really wasting your guys' time there. So overall, I think sleepers, most of these platforms are relatively consistent from platform to platform. It's not too big of a deal really stressing over the differences, but it's also important to understand them. It looks to me like on Sleeper, the positional drop-off in cost is quite gradual. So what you should do is create your own tier list and then see where the guys are at the bottom of a tier, because it seems to me like, for example, I think Mark Andrews is a clear tier above TJ Hawkinson and the other guys, and George Kittle and Dallas Goedert. And if you just look at the cost, it wasn't that significant. You got Andrews for 18, or you could get all these other guys for 20 to 23. Or, for example, at the quarterback position, I think that Jalen Hurts is very clearly in a whole tier above Justin Fields and Justin Herbert and all that, and the cost difference wasn't that much. So I think there's certainly something to be said for just understanding where the positional drop-offs are. Make your own tier list. That's why tier-based ranking is so important. By the way, public announcement, my tier-based rankings are up on my website. I forgot to mention to all of you guys that those are up there, so if you made it this video, made it this far in it, do go take a look at those. They're completely free. Obviously, I want you guys to be able to use those. I'll be getting out half PPR and non-PPR rankings as well. It occurred to me that I really should give you guys those. I've got the projections statted out, so I might as well put those up as well. So I'll give you guys all that. But my point here is that use your tier-based rankings, see where the pre-draft values stray from that, and just strike where that value is. It looked really early on like the value was at the wide receiver position. Look at the wide receivers I got here. I got Diggs for $10 less than Tyreek Hill. I got Amon-Ra St. Brown for $20 less than Cooper Kupp, less than CeeDee Lamb, who I have ranked below him. I had Chris Olave for $23. That's just insane to me. So given how the positional drop-offs worked here, it just made the most sense for me to get these guys. Looking at the running back position, I'm not sure if I regret anything that I did there. I suppose I could have maybe gone a little bit cheaper than Ramondre Stevenson, gotten a guy like Aaron Jones or Miles Sanders, and I would have been able to get a better running back too. So maybe that's what I should have done, but no real regrets. I think I've got a really solid roster here. I've got 4 running backs that I can play. Ramondre is going to anchor us down there, and my receivers are just stacked. So I think this team turned out okay. It's interesting to see how the sleeper platform works out. I obviously would recommend that all of you guys do practices on the platform that you're going to draft on, because it's just good to be comfortable when you're drafting, understand all the little nuances, and it'll be the best thing you can do to prepare yourself for your draft. So it was fun making this video. Just a quick summary. We've got our quarterback in Justin Herbert. Our 4 running backs are Ramondre Stevenson, Khalil Herbert, Brian Robinson, and Samaje Perine. our beautiful wide receivers are Stephon Diggs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave, Quentin Johnston, Brandon Cooks, and Gabe Davis, and our tight end is the one and only Mark Andrews. So I think the team's pretty good. I'd probably give it like a B plus just because our running backs are pretty weak, but everything else is just top tier. I think that's okay. It's also nice going into your season having a clear hole on your team, knowing what you need to do to improve your roster throughout the course of the season. It certainly helps it gives you clarity going into your season, understanding that, okay, it's time to make sure you've got the best running backs off waivers. You know that's what you're looking at right after week 1. You want to make sure that's how you're going to improve your team, and it makes it really easy. So even though I think there is a clear hole here, I think it's going to be pretty easy to fix. You just got to grab those guys on waivers that flash early on, and then you've got studs everywhere else. So this is sort of like a hero RB build. I like doing these kinds of builds. Just normally I'd like to get a slightly better hero at the running back position, a guy like Nick Chubb or something. But yeah, I like the team. Could have done a little bit better, but overall I think it's really solid and a lot of fun. So if it's your first time on the channel, I want to thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate all the support you guys have been giving. We're something over 470 subscribers right now. I really do have a goal of hitting 500 by the start of the NFL season, so I think we can do it. So I appreciate all your support. I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel, especially if you want more content like this. I'm putting out a video pretty much every single day throughout the whole rest of the off season. I'll try and do every single day. It's just tough to keep all that content coming out, but I think I can do it. So yeah, subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. You can click the notification bell so you get more notifications as videos come out. And if you liked the video, which I really hope you did, if you made it this far, please do just give it a thumbs up on the YouTube channel. It really helps with the algorithm, really helps me know that I'm doing a good job, and helps me know that you like what I'm putting out there. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.